我在北京。
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's Up Beijing, a segment of the show where we talk about what's going on in China. But today's topic may not actually be China. The elections in Taiwan. We're going to find the difference. The elections in Taiwan just happened. These were the three parties: the Green Party, the Turquoise Party, and the Blue Party. And we've talked about them before, but we need some background before we jump into what happened with these elections. China and Taiwan. In the late 40s, right after World War II, there was a civil war where the Communist Party won control of the country and the Nationalist Party fled to the island of Taiwan to start their own country, okay? And for a while, the people on Taiwan basically claimed that they owned the whole thing. And China claimed they owned Taiwan. And they had a bit of a standoff. Eventually, tentative peace settled in, where China still claims Taiwan. Taiwan essentially thinks they're their own country. And in that time, since the 50s till now, Taiwan has had a pretty good run of it. GDP per capita skyrocketed in Taiwan. Again, this is where China is. They've had stocks that outperform all the rest of Asia. They are ranked consistently as one of the most free countries in the world. They have high trust in their institutions. They have high trust elections. One of the best run democracies in the world. Here's an example from their election that just happened. This is every vote held up so it's visible to the public. The result is shouted out, repeated, and then tallied. Everything is on a paper ballot. Anyone can watch, take pictures, or film. There is a huge, broad trust in their elections. When the losing parties lose, they quickly call to concede. The losing party of this election literally said, "I should have worked harder." You know, in America, it's kind of crazy to see such a well-run election. And also, in terms of schooling, they are like the highest scoring students of a larger country in the world. It's a well-run country. And because of that, since the Civil War, Taiwan has gone from thinking of itself as the part of China that lost the Civil War to thinking of themselves as their own country. The percentage of people that identify themselves as Taiwanese has skyrocketed over the past, 30 years. Now the majority of the country sees themselves as their own country, Taiwan. That is not agreed with by Xi Jinping, who in his opening year speech said reunification with Taiwan is inevitable. So there's obviously a bit of a standoff between these two ideals, which is driving a lot of what's going on with this election. China said they will crush Taiwan independence efforts. That's the environment we find ourselves in going into a few days ago when this big election happens. And you might think, I get all of that. I get the Taiwanese people's stance on the situation. Why is the rest of the world so interested? Especially America. Why is America so interested in Taiwan? And the main reason for that is because of chips. And it's not these chips, it's these chips. Taiwan is the single greatest manufacturer of semiconductors, aka microchips, in the world. And there are only basically 4 countries that can produce high quality semiconductors at scale. And of those 4, Taiwan is the by far leader. They have 68% of the market. And when it comes to like the really high end, cutting edge, smallest nanometer chips, they have like 84%. Okay. Anytime you've used a car or a tablet or a cell phone, you are likely using something that was made in Taiwan. Taiwan produces the most cutting edge and most valuable stuff that is used by Apple and Nvidia and everyone else to make their technology. And so that becomes a very, very important country for the future. Again, as US and China compete to become the leading country in AI, chips that are made in Taiwan are driving that innovation. So nobody wants to let Taiwan fall into someone else's hand. That's why Taiwan is so important to other countries, not just in their own sphere of influence. So back to the election, okay? The numbers have came in 2 days ago, and the winner, not by a landslide, but by a healthy amount, the Green Party pulls ahead with 40%. This is the party that, again, advocates for the fiercest independence from China. Big win for the Green Party, the 3rd consecutive term in power for the Green Party, which is unprecedented in Taiwan's history. People of Taiwan have resoundingly voted that they want a independent Taiwan, which is what the main thing the Green Party stands for. Their leader spoke.
We are telling the international community that between democracy and authoritarianism, we will stand on the side of democracy. Taiwan will continue to walk side by side with democracies from around the world.
And it's a pretty big deal. These are the new leaders of Taiwan. Inauguration has not happened yet, but it's coming up. And again, they are not like passive supporters of independence. These two people are the forefront of Taiwan independence. Even within their own Green Party, they are like the leaders of like, hey, we need to make ourselves our own independent country. So it's a pretty strong vote in that direction. And the question on everybody's mind, and why this is called the What's Up Beijing segment and not the Oh Hey Taipei segment, is because the real story from all this is, what is Xi Jinping gonna do? After all they did in the lead up to this election, all they said, all the threats, what is going to happen next? That's almost the story of the year. Again, it's already considered a headache. This is the official Taiwan Digital Diplomacy Association. It's already considered a headache for Taiwan to live next to China. But with what they've done leading up to it, it's become even worse, especially as right before the election, China characterized this election as...
For example, they continue to say that the choice in this election is in between war and peace. And if you vote for the DPP's candidate, it will mean war.
Again, this is the Taiwan state minister saying that, like, China keeps calling this a, quote, war and peace election. And so the vote is like a bit of, it's a bit of intimidation tactic or a threat. That being said, this line, China has a much bigger military than Taiwan. However, are they combat ready? Possibly not. There is a bit of a new story rising that perhaps China's army is not as combat ready as they have appeared. Again, I cannot verify this, and I don't even want to say this with any ounce of solidity, but there is some intel coming out that China's army had some missiles filled with water. There's a bit of a corruption scandal. We cannot confirm this. I literally am not confirming this. I am just saying this is something that is a rising piece of news. Now, can't verify this, but we can verify there has been some sort of purge. While we don't know if the missiles filled with water is true, there has been a purge. Xi Jinping has been removing generals and a lot of top military officials from power. The theory is that they are more likely or more amenable to the idea of going to war. Also, in the lead up to this Taiwan election, they floated a ton of spy balloons over Taiwan, in addition to economically trying to threaten them by or increasing tariffs and cutting preferential tariffs that used to be in place for Taiwanese products to China. So all of this is like what they did before, but what are they going to do after? Now that it's confirmed that the Green Party's won the election, what's going to happen? And it turns out, if you look at the immediate response, it's pretty muted. They made one official statement, which is here, which is basically that whatever change takes place in Taiwan, the basic fact that there is only one China in the world and Taiwan is part of it will not change. The international community upholds the one China principle, and long-standing and overwhelming adherence to this principle will not change. Now, what's interesting is that this is extremely similar, including exact verbatim quotes, to what they said in 2020 in the last Taiwan election when the Green Party also won. In fact, if you were to plug in the two statements they made into Turnitin, you would get a 98% match. They basically plagiarized their own response. It's exactly the same. And on Chinese social media, the response is also pretty interesting. Number one trending on the day of the election was a statement that said the basic fact that Taiwan is a part of China will not change. But what was interesting about it, this comes from Stefik, our Marketing Monday researcher who speaks Chinese. She looked into this. However, she clicked on it and looked into it. So many of the messages were like exact duplicates that imply some sort of botting. They all said there's only one China exactly. These are the only comments that were allowed to be shown. So if you click this number one topic, even though it's supposed to be number one, there are only 18 comments shown. You cannot see any more. But also interesting is that if you look at the viewership trend of this topic, it had 419 million views the day of the event and then instantly disappeared. And again, Stefik and I have tried consistently to show a deeper, more nuanced discussion of China. I think there's a lot of people that only get their news from like Reddit comments and have a really, I think, simplified basic view of China. But even Stefik and I agreed on this. This is pretty blatant censorship. This is like what happened in this case is like pretty blatantly a crackdown or like a limiting of people's ability to discuss at all what's going on in Taiwan. For example, if right now she goes to Little Red Book, which is Chinese social media, and searches for Taiwan election or the name of the new Taiwanese president, there are 0 results. Not one person in all of China has discussed Taiwan election once. So that's interesting. That's how they're handling it domestically. How are they handling it internationally? And that is what a lot of the news since the election has been about. The big story that happened yesterday is that, world-renowned gargantuan country Nauru severed diplomatic ties with Taiwan in favor of China. China immediately did a press conference about this diplomatic flip for, again, a country that has like 10,000 people. The Nauru government's decision of reestablishing diplomatic ties to China once again shows the one China principle is where global opinion trends and where the arc of history bends. China stands ready to work with Nauru to open up new chapters of our bilateral relations. I don't know how China is going to work with Nauru because their GDP is equivalent to one XQC. And Taiwan maintains that the reason Nauru flipped sides is because of money diplomacy. Basically, Nauru asked for money for, I think, a detention center or something, and Taiwan wouldn't supply it, and I guess China trades more with them, they economically pressured them, so they flipped. Seems like a small country, doesn't really matter, but it is part of a larger plan to diplomatically isolate Taiwan. These are all the countries that recognize Taiwan as a country and had official diplomatic relations with them. A lot of the world. By 2023, this is the amount of countries left. One by one, China has used economic and military pressure to convince all other countries to not recognize Taiwan as an official nation. All of these countries combined, all 12 of them, have less population than Uganda. So essentially, there is only one Uganda in the world that actually officially recognizes Taiwan. However, for all of you watching on Twitch, there is some good news. There is an island called Tuvalu. This island is known for one thing, having 11,000 people and making most of its money because it sells the .tv domain name to Twitch. Tuvalu is one of the 12. So as citizens of Twitch TV, we all officially recognize Taiwan as a country. However, if this was truly the case, if only these countries actually supported Taiwan, this invasion or diplomatic assimilation would have already happened. See, the US does not formally support Taiwan independence. Biden's first quote after the election, "We don't support Taiwan independence. We support one China policy." But then Biden immediately turns to camera essentially and gives a big fat wink. Essentially, this is what the United States has been doing, a strategic ambiguity, where to avoid provocation, we say we support the one China policy, where in actuality, we sell weapons and arms and trade deals with Taiwan. And immediately after the election in Taiwan, the United States sent an unofficial delegation that says support for Taiwan is rock solid. Again, it's not an official delegation, but it's an unofficial one. So it's a real balancing act here. And it's one of the reasons that Taiwan can feel at least somewhat safe, because they have allies that more than what officially they seem to have. The UK, David Cameron, the former minister of the UK. The elections today are a testament to Taiwan's vibrant democracy. I hope the two sides of the Taiwan Strait will renew efforts to resolve differences peacefully through constructive dialogue, without the threat or use of force. Obviously, that is talking to one side. Taiwan is not threatening force on China. For Japan, Taiwan is an extremely crucial partner and an important friend. This is such a funny thing to say because Japan does not even officially recognize that Taiwan exists. It's so funny that all these countries can simultaneously say two sides of this issue. China cannot really threaten these three countries, but doesn't like this. So they have responded to these messages and say that these send a seriously incorrect signal to Taiwan independent separatist forces, basically the government of Taiwan, the democratic government of Taiwan. And that all of these countries should refrain from disrupting peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. That being said, these countries can't really be threatened, but Philippines are well within China's sphere of influence and absolutely can. When the president of the Philippines tweeted this, Xi Jinping lost his shit. Xi Jinping went laser eyes mode, dude. Philippines was warned not to play with fire over their president's Taiwan remarks. They vented fury at the Philippines. In fact, they summoned the diplomat from the Philippines to China. They summoned him to China and also made a public statement that he better read more books. He needs to sit down and read more books until he understands that Taiwan is not a real country. And so, back to these elections. What do they mean within Taiwan? Because actually, even though the Green Party was predicted to win, the result is pretty surprising. These are some of Taiwanese friends of Stefik. Lai still won, but we're all shocked. You know, there's a bit of like worry about it. And that's because the Green Party actually went from 68 seats in the legislature, in like the parliament, down to 51, which means we are actually in the beginning of what you could call a three-party politics in Taiwan. That's not really a sad moment. I actually want to talk about it more. The real change between previous elections and now is the introduction of this guy in the middle, Ko. This guy came onto the scene in his first election ever. This is the first election of the third party here in Taiwan. And basically what they said is, yes, the China question is important. We have to balance our relationship between China and US. And ideally, we want to keep the status quo. But also, we have to govern. And also, young people can't afford houses. And you know what? I'm hearing that from young people all over the world. This is not just a Taiwan problem. This is a problem in countries world over. We have to find a way to get young people to be able to afford quality jobs and houses. And so, coming out of nowhere, they captured 8 seats in parliament. And because the election was so disputed, so split, guess what? They're now the swing vote. So if the DPP and the KMT disagree on something, you need Ko for the majority. They basically went from the smallest party to almost the decider on every Taiwanese political issue. It's actually kind of crazy, which I think is the product of what is an extremely well-run and well-trusted democracy, where you can actually have a third party come out of nowhere and make a serious splash and have an influence. And so while I support the DPP's independence, I also support the rise of Ko to figure out how to solve problems for a new age, which all countries are struggling with. As you look around the rest of the world, you'll notice that young people since 1995 have become more and more dissatisfied with democracy. And I wonder if some of that has to do with the fact that we have no way for a non-massive majority party to get any sort of voice. We have no way for young people to voice these concerns and get some sort of introduction into the policy. So hopefully there's a lesson from this. We can learn from this and have some sort of these changes happen in other democracies around the world. Or we could end up with World War III. We don't know, and this year is going to be a pretty pivotal one to decide. So if you want to learn more about it, we're going to follow it every week here on Marketing Monday Was It Beijing. Thanks for watching, and tune in every week for more information on what's going on around the world. Appreciate it.
Check it.